Welcome to the Effortless Mindfulness Podcast. I'm Loch Kelly, and this is a show about awakening to the deepest dimensions of who you are. In today's show, I have the great pleasure of having my friend and colleague, Henry Shukman, as my guest. Henry is a poet, author, meditation teacher, and co-founder of the meditation app, The Way. His most recent book is called Original Love. Henry and I have a great deal of fun together talking about our experiences and ways to help you access essential well-being. Before we get into today's episode, I wanted to let you know that you can get 20% off of the Mindful Glimpses app, which was just named the best meditation app of 2025 on YouTube. Now, on to our show. Happy to welcome today Henry Shukman. Hi, Henry.
Hi, Loch. I'm absolutely thrilled to get to do this with you. Thanks for having me.
Yes, this is a real delight. I told one of my students, he said, "Oh, the two happy teachers." So I know we take it seriously, but we're not serious, right? So I'm just delighted to spend this time with you. It was such a wonderful pleasure to meet number of years ago out in Esalen when we were both teaching together.
Yeah, we were there exactly the same time.
Yes.
Unfortunately, we weren't teaching the same course together. That would have been a lot of fun.
That's right. But we were paralleling each other. And, I think that's the fun of this dialogue. Hopefully we can kind of dive deeply. The feeling that we're both coming from the respect and depth of different traditions and some overlapping traditions, and then trying to bring creative contemporary ways to help people access what has been so revered throughout time, which is relief of suffering and something called awakening, which we'll try to figure out what that means. I'm still trying to figure it out myself.
Yeah, and those are, of course, all of the above is topics that I've kind of seemed to have dedicated my life to, one way or another. And whatever this life is, there's a very happy thing to be engaged with those things, actually.
Yes. Yeah. Beautiful. And I think we both kind of stumbled into this and kind of, I feel great good fortune just to be able to say to people, check it out. The water's great. Come on in. If I can be of service and, without kind of creating any kind of fundamentalist belief system and really focusing on kind of inquiry and koan approaches, right? Which is similar. So that might be a good place to start, is to talk a little about inquiry and koans and glimpses, kind of what they are and how they're similar and how they can be helpful and how we're kind of walking around these facets of a diamond.
Yeah. Actually, I heard this image recently. It was like, I think it was from Alan Watts, that it's like, the wheel does have a hub. There really is a hub there, which all things are emerging out of. And all these different traditions are points on the rim that have got their spokes down to the same hub. I'm not entirely convinced now that that's actually correct. I think there are different places that some traditions want to go to. I don't think they're all absolutely I think it's more like a mountain range rather than one mountain, personally. But yeah, talking about, I would say, I want to just throw this out as a starting point, like, deep inquiry into present moment experience is how I began. And without knowing that I was going to find something so drastically different from my starting point, I was just very curious about what is it to be conscious. I was recognizing as a kid, that it seemed like often I was awake, but I wasn't conscious. I remember one morning going to school with my satchel of books on my back and kicking a stone down the gutter as I was walking to school. And I suddenly reached a lamppost and realized I don't know how I got to this lamppost from the previous one. My mind was elsewhere. And so that got me thinking, well, I know I'm awake, whatever that means. I've been asleep and woke up, an hour and 45 minutes ago. I got dressed, had breakfast, and now I'm walking to school. I am awake by ordinary standards of reckoning. But is there a dial on wakefulness? Could I be more awake? And what about when I'm awake, but I just have no idea where I've just been for a minute? Was I awake then or what? So I was curious about it.
Yes.
But and it was like, well, and what is it to be conscious? What is actually happening when I perceive the world? What's really going on? And I thought that's just kind of interesting. It's just kind of interesting. But when I was 19, out of the blue, I got hit by, a pretty intense experience of, I didn't know what it was, except that I discovered the truth. Well, I was just examining my experience in a given moment. Wait a minute, what's really happening? There's this thing that's conscious that I call me, and it's receiving signals from out there, and it's seeing stuff, and the signals, the light waves are producing this image of the world, and I was just thinking it through and studying it. And for me, that was a moment of real deep inquiry, and it actually catalyzed a total shift in the way I was experiencing. I wasn't here the way I thought. That wasn't out there the way I thought. It was somehow one. And that went a little deeper into emptiness, that experience. But in other words, the point I'm making is that inquiry can be quite spontaneous.
Yes.
That we just get curious.
Yeah.
What's going on here?
Yeah.
And I think that's almost, perhaps that personal sense of investigation is the most important thing. And then we might meet with traditions or methods that have come down over the ages that could sort of support that kind of investigation. But we got to have it, I think, inside us that we really want to know. We really are interested. I don't know how you.
Yeah,
you feel
I mean, there's a lot there that I'd love to dialogue about. Yeah, I certainly think that for me, interestingly, I'll talk a little about my experience at 19 as well, which is interesting. But that curiosity that I feel that when people say, well, who are the students that are likely to, kind of get what you're teaching or kind of be able to make that shift from ordinary consciousness to non-ordinary, extraordinarily ordinary.
Ordinarily extraordinary.
Ordinarily extraordinary, which in Zen is called ordinary.
Exactly.
But science calls it non-ordinary, and it's the natural, but it's not the old normal, it's the new normal. No.
That's right. It's not the conventional, I say. Yeah.
It's not the conventional, it's it's really quite amazing. So I say, when people say, well, who are they? And I say, well, they're not the people who have, traditionally done a lot of meditation practice. They're kind of the naturals, or they're kind of good-hearted people, or they're kind of the creatives. So they're curious. They're curious, and they're open, and they're like, well, what do you mean by that? Where am I looking? What am I looking with? What? Oh, wait a minute. I can look at my thoughts, but you're asking me to look at awareness? But what am I looking with? Oh, I'm not looking with my normal waking consciousness or thought. You're saying that there's an awareness that can know itself. Oh, what? No. Oh, well, let me try. Oh, whoa. So this, so there's that, playful defining of terms, and then going beyond words,
Exactly. Well, that's where koans come in, because koans have been described as words that take us beyond words.
Yes.
And but they're they're a tricky thing. They're their own little weird territory. But for those who don't know, maybe I'll just say a word on them. The koans are these little phrases, basically, sometimes questions, sometimes little phrases, sometimes little dialogues that have come out of the encounters between students and students, or teachers and students, or teachers and teachers in the Zen tradition, which sees itself going right back to Shakyamuni Buddha. And some of the koans are even from Indian days, 2,300 years ago, whatever. But the vast majority are from this great period in Chinese history, the Tang dynasty, which was 618 to 908, in case anybody's interested. So like 600s to early 900s, when there was a real flourishing of Chinese culture, kind of fertilized by this practice of Zen. And you had bureaucrats desperate to get into the hills to meditate. You had emperors wanting to get time out and go to a monastery. And there was a fascination with meditation as a pathway, as a portal to a radical shift in understanding of what we are. And that was widely recognized, and there was also a great interest in poetry. It blows my mind. But to join the official bureaucracy, the exam was writing a poem. It was, how good was your poem? If it's good enough, we might bring you in on the lower level, But we didn't like that metaphor in the third line. You can't come in, It's like, whoa, that's such a different mindset. Yeah. But a lot of both the poetry, the practice, the veneration for the meditative experience, it was also tied deeply to nature and the landscape. They were very conscious of the difference between what they call the red dust of living in the city versus the mountains, the gorges, the rivers, the clouds, the forests. That was where you could go and discover that you were not separate from it. That was in that non-human made. Well, we now know you don't have to go there actually, but
that's right.
They found it was very helpful to go to the natural setting. But they wanted to find this body is part of all of that. It's an inseparable field, and that was what was celebrated. So a lot of the koans express that kind of non-separation. And they do it in mysterious ways. Like the famous one, the sound of two hands clapping, but have you heard the sound of one hand? What is the sound of one hand? I've had students come and they go like this. It's easy.
Right.
That's the sound of one. Yeah.
Right. How about this?
Yeah. I say, sorry, not yet. Not yet. Sit with it more.
So walk me through that. So if you can kind of reverse engineer for us, I know it's inscrutable. So often I'll ask a Zen teacher like, oh, well, it's beyond description, but you can describe. So if you first try to understand it with the usual way of knowing of intellect and words and like trying different ways to solve a problem, right? And then what happens?
Well, at some point, if you're engaging with a teacher, they'll tell you, not yet, keep going, not yet. And if you know that there's a possibility of a kind of shift in your sense of things, a radical shift in your sense of who you are and what your relationship is with everything, quote unquote, else, if you know that that's a possibility, and that this koan, what is the sound of one hand, is actually on record as having triggered multiple shifts through the ages, something might happen. There's a guy who was actually a military surgeon who was working with it. It was a remote student of mine. And, he came out of a intense operation into the open air. He'd been sitting with what is the sound of one hand. And suddenly he just discovered this vast field of non-separateness. And he knew that was actually the sound of one hand. This very hand is bringing forth the whole field. And so it's always about sort of some kind of non-separability. So that's very sort of sketchy look at it. But how do we actually?
What happens? Where do we go from? Where does the person who's in the smart person trying to figure out life and how do I do this? How do I learn that? What's this?
Yeah.
I'm going to try to meditate. I'll watch my breath. I'll watch my thoughts. And now it's like, well, how about this? What's the sound of one hand?
Yeah. Yeah. So the so this is why I don't only teach core Zen anymore.
Mhm.
This is exactly why, because some people just sort of pop, and it's probably about 5%, I think, who come in, and those are earnest sitters anyway. They're sort of, they know how to sit still and really take something deep into their investigation in their own mind, and they're not gonna be they're gonna be patient with it as well, and they let it sort of ripen at the same time. I think this early koan training, where we're going from not having seen it to seeing it, that's I'm very grateful to Zen and the koan tradition, but I think it's maybe arguably not the most efficient method for that first step, because it is almost like natural spontaneous awakening. It's not quite, because you got the sitting happening and you have got the fertilizing agent of the koan, but it's deeply unpredictable. So actually these days I'm bringing in other things. And this is a little twist on another early Zen koan. It's very, it's common to many traditions. It's just, who am I? What am I? Where am I? Who is this? What is this? What is I? So we can work with questions like that as well. But you see, Zen really, formal Zen does not do guided meditation. So I've over the last 5 years, that's been one of the big shifts in my teaching. During COVID, I just felt, man, all these people were showing up who just needed some guidance, and so I bring in little pointers, little nudges across the board, for settling down and then starting to investigate.
That's wonderful. Yes, yeah. The during the same similar period of time, the Theravada, insight meditation went north to North India, and the Mahamudra tradition began. So the Mahamudra is now taken up by the Tibetan tradition, and kind of brought into what's called Vajrayana. But prior to that, it was more of a Mahayana tradition, was non-dual, and the type of inquiry that was done was a kind of a glimpse practice. So it wouldn't try to short circuit the mind. It would actually ask the awareness to look directly. And it would it would tell you. So I think the more Chan and the insight meditation are what's called via negativa. So they're in the Western tradition, meaning we're not going to tell you what you're going to find. We're going to negate it. We're going to just take away any, and then we're just going to allow that which is searching to relax or step back or dissolve and be no thing. And when, muddy water let stand becomes clear, it's done through negation. So the Mahamudra and the Dzogchen is done by saying there is this awareness that's interconnected with everything. And here's the question that'll get you out of the mind. So the pointer, so that becomes a pointer but the pointer is being done by the awareness, because the premise is, well, the awake consciousness you're seeking is already within you.
Mm-hmm.
It's just being covered over. So let me talk directly to that awake consciousness and have it just either have that small self step back and there's the sky, or have the sky open up and look to itself. So, one of the interesting pointers is is what's it's giving the premise first. There is this awake consciousness that's awareness based rather than thought based. It's interconnected and arises as your body and everything else. So if the obscuring issue is this brain mind and this I think therefore I am, and if it could relax, what would be here? Could you notice it? And so the question that I've kind of come up with in a modern form is, so what's here now when there's no problem to solve?
Yes, I love that. I love that. I've heard that in various contexts. I actually use it myself at times. It's very good. Yeah. It's very good, because so the self is so used to its problem solving.
That's it.
Practice.
That's suddenly its job.
Yeah, and then suddenly,
yeah,
it's all here. It's all here.
Yeah,
beautiful.
And so that's the interesting thing, is to kind of give the map first, rather than saying, well, we're not going to say anything, because the sense that Buddha had coming from the Hindu tradition is like, well, pray to this God and visualize this and see that and try to get this. And he was like, okay, forget it. You're getting, there's too much trying here. Just sit, and let everything settle and notice that everything's coming and going, and there isn't, just let everything arise. Yeah.
Well, there's this in an early Chinese Buddhist document from the 6th century. There's an image of a cart track. I really like this. They say it was a teacher just after Bodhidharma, the supposed founder of Zen or Chan in China. I've forgotten his name now. And he said, imagine a cart track. One, it's got 2 wheel tracks, going over the hills. And one of the wheel tracks is 4 foundations of mindfulness. And the other wheel track is realization. And you need both cart tracks. That's what the image says. So it's a little bit, Bodhidharma actually had something similar. He said there are 2 entries to practice. One is basically the path of gradually developing through mindful practices, step by step. You get to just know your own body, you get to know your own experience, you get to know your own mind, and you get closer and closer, and you can gradually get to the lift-off point, or the seeing through, or you just get it. Some people just get it. So 2 cart tracks, two, but really one cart, obviously.
Right. Yes. And I think in our contemporary world, for me, my training, my 2 cart tracks were psychology and both, developmental psychology and psychotherapy, and understanding the personality and a little more bringing the wisdom of the West and the wisdom of the East, the other being more of both a gradual. I started actually with Zen, with Philip Kapleau, and first book I ever read was Zen and the Art of Archery. So a little tiny book. And then, I know that book. And then I went to Sri Lanka and did, a year of Vipassana 21-day retreats, 10-day retreats. Then I went up to Dharamsala and over to Nepal to meet Tulku Urgyen, who gave me a pointing out instruction. And within 10 minutes, I felt the same way as the end of a 10-day retreat. So it was like, okay, well, maybe, so there was good preparation. And it kind of threw me back into what is waking up and growing up, so that I felt like there's some natural ethical training that is done, I think, in most, or attempted to be done in Western culture. So I could see how that was so important. And my training as a psychotherapist, has an ethics component that you're trained in. So that's really key for both being a teacher. And we've seen, that kind of initial Kensho awakening from the small sense of self still gets taken over by these other subpersonalities, and people start acting out, even though they think they're fully awake, but they've just gone through the first awakening. So for me, that working with the Some people have complex trauma, but all of us have everyday trauma, which just means that we grew up with sensitive human bodies, and we have, the system I use is mostly subpersonalities that have been hurt, and the sense of how to see that once you even sit or have a glimpse, where do you land that isn't back in a self or a subpersonality? How do you work with the arising thoughts, feelings, sensations, and personality?
Beautiful. I think that's a beautiful map of the path of development. And I think I agree. I mean, I think that's a lovely way of looking at even the car track metaphor, that we've got to have that other track going on as well. In my own case, it was very similar. I had, in spite of that early awakening, which was very powerful, I went home 6 weeks later, and all the trauma and complexity of the home I'd grown up in just sort of overwhelmed me when I got home. And it was only in my mid-20s I started meditating regularly, daily, actually, very committed, and doing therapy. I started to actually develop in ways I didn't know I needed to, until I started to recognize how much I really did need to. And also developing in the path of meditation. So for me, that was a great combination to have the two going. But there is one, it took a long time, but eventually, in the Zen context, and I did go into other contexts as well for training, some mindfulness, of course, inevitably, and TM I did for several years, transcendental meditation. But what I loved about Zen was that it was immediately clear that it totally knew what I'd experienced when I was 19 years old, and my first long retreat, not that long, a week long, something different but similar happened in that first retreat, and I was sold on Zen, alas. But it did eventually, like after, 20 years, 17 years of practice or something, a different kind of experience happened that it really opened up. There was no need to land somewhere after it. That landing back in something, just that was gone. And so that, I think, I mean, I don't, that was, again, I think Zen it can be very powerful and very deep, but in terms of sort of reliable efficiency, it's questionable, I think there's certain kinds of people and temperaments that are just great for it, and other kinds that might not be. So I think it's so cool that we're in a time when so many different approaches are available and are learning from each other, and have I taken us off track? No, I think it's about the same topic. It's like it's sort of development, growing up and waking up, exactly.
Yes,
and then cleaning up. I think
and then cleaning up and showing up. You can keep going up.
Exactly.
And then you got to get down.
Or down.
Get down with it. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that bit at the back of your book on Effortless Mindfulness, where you talk about bypassing, but underpassing and overpassing as well. I totally agree. Yeah.
Yeah. The spiritual bypass is, some people get to that first awakening and try to act like, oh, well, only awakening or awareness is real. Everything else is a movie, as if it's empty, it's not real. And they start applying that initial insight of emptiness being non-substantial to the relative world, whereas the non-dual isn't just that it's awareness, and that's not dual. Awareness is not dualistic. However, the non-dual is that pure awareness and the relative aliveness and human condition are not two.
Exactly. That's the real insight. That's the real awakening.
Yes.
Is when exactly. A lot of people, me too. It was like, for some years, it was like, there's either that where, whoa, it's all mindful awake, or there's me, troubled Henry,
Yes, that's right.
But actually to get over that duality is true non-duality.
It's true non-duality. And then there's everything's perfectly managed by the unborn. And then there's this awake consciousness that isn't trying to get rid or stop thoughts and feelings and even parts that what I call shake and bake. They'll come up even from early childhood that I'm like, whoa. But they're happening within the sky, but not just the sky, the ocean and the earth. So all three are here, and they're like, woo, and there's just more space and there's more love. So that's the next topic, is getting to this waking up and waking down. So waking in and waking, what I call waking in and then waking out to love.
I love that.
So this, this book of yours called Original Love, and now I'm calling kind of these 5 stages I talk about. You talk about 4 ins, but the last one is called Awake Loving Flow. So the idea is that there's an awakeness, but then love is its fabric, and then there's that ability to have open-eyed action in the world. So it's not just awake and love that you're but you're able flow in the sense of interactive, relational,
yes,
everyday life. Yeah.
Yes. So in other words, you don't need to be in a sort of secluded quiet in order to bask in it. You can actually bask in it in the course of your interactions.
Yeah. And it actually, when my experience is when I kind of, even that first awakening with Toko Ergen, where he did this pointing out, it was like a 10-day retreat, except my eyes were open and I had the calm, but I had the energy and I had the love. And I was like, oh my God, look at everyone. They're all so cute, like exactly. All the people, and let alone nature. It was like everyone was just me, meaning they had the same namaste, that inner sense. And how could you treat somebody poorly that is the same as you?
Yes.
So there was this, and there was a kind of a feeling, oh, I don't have to stay here and join a monastery, even though I've been given this gift that has more depth and will continue to unfold. I'm going back to New York City,
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's very like Zen Kensho, because Kensho usually doesn't happen on the meditation cushion.
Right.
You're kind of turning the soil in some way with your sitting, but nearly always it happens the moment you least expect it. You're opening the fridge at home, or you're one of your kids is complaining about the supper you just made, or just in the midst of absolutely ordinary experience, you suddenly see what ordinary experience is, and that it has not been what you've been caught up in thinking it was, so the power of it as a catalytic agent in life is that it does it's a revelation of your ordinary life, and I think that's really important, that you see, man, you don't have to be in a special place at all, whether in a monastery in Dharamsala or wherever it is, you just don't need to stay there. And the fact that it comes with your eyes open as well, doesn't matter if they're open or closed, it doesn't make any difference. But the point is that it's not a meditative accomplishment. It's not, because there's a whole world of jhana states and very subtle, beautiful, refined states of mind we can get into in meditation that are nothing to do with this realization. They're great, they're beautiful. I love them. I think I popped into them as a kid randomly at times, jhana stuff. But for me, it's sort of important to recognize, man, that's not the same as the kind of awakening we're talking about.
That's right. Yeah, and the kind of the beauty of just living this precious human life, that it's like it's such a delight to engage, in this human realm when you're not thrown about by fears and hopes and yet fears and hopes arise to this new consciousness that sees it as just like little kids arising.
Yes,
yeah.
Exactly.
And I'll tell you the 19-year-old short awakening story, because so I had these 3 deaths that happened when I was. So I had my grandmother who lived with us, who was 99, who passed away. Then my best friend from the sports ice hockey team died in a car accident. And then my father got cancer and was for a year getting better. And then he passed away. And so that winter or early spring, I was coming out of the library, and it was this, just kind of late at night, kind of feeling tired. And I just heard this inner voice that said, I don't know if you can take this much longer. And what I did is I kind of looked up with my awareness, and I looked up, and then it looked right through that, and it just opened to the night sky. It just went, oh, wait a minute. Oh, take what? And then it just connected to this vast, and then it just dropped into my body and everything else. And I just started crying and laughing and feeling this tremendous support. And, it wasn't anything like spiritual even. It just felt like, this is the way it's always been. There's support.
Yes.
And it's not, it's me, and it's not me, and it's greater than me. And I don't have to carry this burden myself.
Oh man. That's what a beautiful story. And I'm sorry for the tragedies around it, but that's such a beautiful story. That's very like me. I mean, and that's where my term original love, it comes from exactly that. Well, I mean, this experience I had when I was 19, I'd grown up throughout my childhood with very severe eczema. And then I went away for 6 months and worked on the other side of the world and backpacked, and my eczema got better. I wrote my first book. And towards the end of that trip, I was watching this sunset on the ocean. It's so indescribably beautiful, all on my own on a beach. And I was studying the light on the water. And suddenly I realized that it wasn't outside me. And then I was kind of sucked into, felt like this totally insubstantial, infinite, sizeless, empty something. And I knew the beginning of time was here and the end of time. The edge of the universe was at the end of my nose. It was like all space shrank to nothing. And then I sort of came back, and in the sense of knowing I was standing on a beach. There was a body, there was a mind, I was standing on the beach. And suddenly it was just this overwhelming sense of love that's in the fabric of this whole experience. It's not something separate that's added. It's not coming from elsewhere. It's in the very weave of the one fabric, that isn't really a fabric at all, but it is that utter belonging that is like love, and so that kind of unconditional love is what I'm trying to sort of point to. But in my book, I'm trying to say, hey, you do not have to have a cataclysmic awakening to taste it. You get it in many small ways and larger ways, and they're all good. And any time that somebody recognizes I'm hurting or something, that's actually a little drop of it showing up.
It's a little door of pain or compassion with passion.
Exactly.
That opens. But that is the language I use too, is fabric. That's what it feels like.
Right.
It feels like it's the ground but it's not even the ground like it's holding anything. It's like Indra's web or something like that. It's this, it's the nature of how it dances.
Yeah, exactly.
Like when it comes from formlessness into form, you hear that, form is emptiness, emptiness is form. That sounds kind of neutral, but then they call it the Heart Sutra. So something's missing there. Where do we get the heart? Form is emptiness, emptiness is form. Heart Sutra. Because that's what shows up. It's like form is emptiness. Emptiness is awake. Awake emptiness is the form of bodhicitta, which is awake heart. So that awake heart is and it's, we can talk about it. I'm just thinking people are like, good for you guys, but it's, there's no doubt that many people, just by saying it, just a glimpse of it, that's, what my approach is, small glimpses many times. And, 60 to 80% can get a glimpse of that. There's, others can get the awareness, or they can get the awareness and the and the unity of awareness and aliveness, the non-dual presence, but they can't quite get the love yet. But just say just keep letting it show itself to itself.
Right. On the love side, I'm these days, my main teaching is just allowing. So notice if you're not allowing. If you've been checked out for a little bit, just notice that that's been happening, and just see, is there any subtle resistance that might have been present? Really, we're looking in the body, we're looking in the kind of torso. Is there any subtle sense of resisting, just a little tightening? Like, I'm not quite sure why, but there's something I just don't quite want. I want to, or reluctance or resisting. Can I find it? And usually we can. There's a lot of, most people will find some emotion tone if they go subtle and still. They can usually find some subtle wisp. Maybe not. Maybe it's just wide open. Fine. But if there is something, what I'm trying to encourage these days is like, don't try to get rid of it. Welcome it.
Yes, welcome. That's the word I use. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that allowing, that's not just neutral, like sometimes in the mindfulness, non-judgmental witnessing. So there's a little neutrality and a little detached, first stage of mindfulness is you actually step out of the body in order to observe the body coming and going, and you have this non-judgmental or just allow everything. But this is an embracing or a welcoming. So sometimes I say it's not about what's arising, but it's about what or who it's arising to. So that has a natural welcoming. You're not even welcoming. You're not even trying to allow. You're shifting into that which is allowing by its nature.
That's right. Exactly. The capacity for welcoming is already here.
Yes.
And you're just letting that come forth.
So and that preciousness of that. So it's almost like the pointing isn't so much about the first stage, which is 4 foundations, or even in psychology, transforming, negative states into positive. But it's really like, okay, whatever that is, that's going to continue to happen. You're not getting out of pleasant and unpleasant. You're just not. And you're not getting out of parts that will hurt, or even, I've never seen anyone just clear up all their, personality. It's about, is there a dimension of true nature or awake consciousness or non-dual presence or unconditional love or wake loving flow or true self, that with a capital S, that is you, that is already within everything that's arising.
Exactly. So exactly, one of the little doorways to that that I teach is like, don't worry about non-dual and awakening and that big stuff. Just let that allowing come forth. And there's a tenderness, there's a little flavor of tenderness with it. And that is part of the great ocean of original love. And even if you don't sense the great ocean, you don't need to. One drop of love is love. It's like, whether Ramana Maharshi may have been an ocean of glittering ocean of clarity, but the muddy puddle in the Walmart parking lot is the same water, and it's just as good, actually. And so I'm finding that's quite helpful for people, when especially there's a way that, and that really, particularly, I think your story with your 3 losses and coming in the parking lot, and there's that voice. I don't know if you can take it. And you look at where that voice was. It's very cool, that looking up. There's actually, wildly, Locke, there's some research by James Austin, who wrote these famous books on the Zen brain. He actually studies looking. Like, he had a Kensho as a young Zenny on a railway platform. He was studying in London for a while, and somewhere in Croydon, south of London, he was on a train platform, and he looked up and had a Kensho, and he's been interested to find out, is there something about whatever that part of the brain is that's associated with looking and upward and in a certain direction or something that could trigger Kensho. Anyway, so that's a side point. But But the point that is so cool there that I totally very much resonates with this. I've known this time and again in my own practice where yuck, something I don't want to feel, and let me slow down. I'm with it. Okay, what is it? Okay, oh, there it is. There it is. And by really surrendering and letting the welcome come forth, that little nub of discomfort becomes part of something vast and beautiful, and it's actually it can be reframed
Yes.
as original nature showing itself.
That's right. Yes, that
Yeah.
it's kind of bubbling. It's the it's the yin and the yang of dark and light. So it's going to be pleasant and unpleasant, and you're not trying to, on a relative level, clear everything away. So almost allowing the first thing, and then also allowing the resistance.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. You're letting the system.
Don't just allow the thing and fight resistance. Get out of here. I'm trying to allow this.
Exactly.
Because that gets they call a self-like part in this psychology
right.
So it becomes almost like a spiritual ego.
Yes.
Which is a kind of intellectual overpass. That's what I call it.
Yes. Nice. No, exactly. You're led. Well, it's not exactly you. It's this other thing that is really you, actually. But you're letting it do.
It's already doing that. So going back to the looking, so part of the glimpsing or the pointing is that I actually work with, one of my methods is assuming that awareness is already inherent and it's just identified or attached to the thinker. So I have it just unhook and move to seeing, move to hearing. Now open up, let the awareness open up to discover the awareness that's already here, that's equally inside now. So
yes,
it goes, or I do this thing with the eyes where I say, okay, so just allow your awareness to open up. And as you do, your peripheral vision will open up, and then just continue around, let a smile come to your face, breathe in, let it unhook from seeing, and continue somehow around to the sides and behind you. So your view is opened up, and then breathe out and let it all mingle. What do you think about
beautiful.
that?
I enjoyed that. I did something similar. Yeah. Lovely.
Yeah.
And then I was so happy to hear you say earlier, like how it's all helping us cherish this human dance, this human experience. It's not checking out.
No.
It's not going to some, jhana state where I'm just, I've gone into my chamber of beautiful awareness and it's humming away beautifully. I love that. I have done a lot of jhana training.
Yes, I did some too. Yeah, in Sri Lanka.
But it's not the same as this realizing, alive, live realizing.
Yes, that's right.
The love that comes on for our very human predicament, predicaments and beauties, all of it is held. It all becomes beautiful from the vantage of what really is here.
Yeah. This has been very much fun. This is like a real playground to get to.
Playing with the wide open field.
It's so
beautiful. Yeah.
And
dancing.
Dancing
together.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Henry. And I thank you all for listening, and please look up Henry's books, and he has events and his app called The Way, and all of it's good.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm really honored and thrilled.
Okay. Thank you, Henry.
Okay.
Be well.
Bye.
Take a few minutes now to experience how you can discover that loving kindness and compassion are already here. Sit comfortably, eyes open or closed, and be aware of all your senses. Notice the activity of thinking in your head. Begin by unhooking local awareness from thoughts in your head. Let local awareness move down to know your jaw from within your jaw. Then feel local awareness move down below your neck. Sense the awareness, aliveness, and space directly from within your body. Become familiar with this direct knowing using local awareness, which is neither looking down from your head nor going back up to your thoughts to know. Feel awareness and aliveness together as awareness energy. Rest without going to sleep, and stay aware without going to thought to know. Feel that awareness can know both the awareness and aliveness from within your body. Notice a feeling of open-hearted awareness from within the space in the center of your body. Feel as if you have relocated knowing from thinking in your head to this embodied heart-mind within you, which you are now aware from. Notice that you can invite and welcome any thoughts and emotions into the space of your heart-mind so that you can remain at home in your open-hearted awareness and have all information from the office of your head come to you as if by Wi-Fi. Feel the sense of effortless ease, well-being, and okayness when you're here now. Notice if there's a subtle sense of joy, tenderness, loving kindness, bliss, or compassion naturally arising from here. Sense this natural loving kindness nourishing every cell of your body and beginning to open outward to everyone and everything all around. Be here now, having dropped your center from head to heart, so you can look out of the eyes of your heart mind and see how everything looks and feels. Join with the natural loving kindness and allow it to radiate outward. Feel how your deepest intention has always been for all beings to be well and happy. May all beings be free of suffering and experience naturally interconnected love. Enjoy. I hope you enjoyed this episode and the glimpse practice. If you did, please check out our website and the 20% off of the award-winning Mindful Glimpses app in the link below. And please consider leaving us a rating and a review. This is by far the best way to help get effortless mindfulness out to more people. Thank you so much, And until next time, take care.